Welcome back to the Maple Dragon Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Robson. It was only just a few weeks ago I was talking to the students while teaching them English, is about the kind of adaptations that they had to make moving from their hometowns to come to Yantai and go to Ludong University. And one of the things they brought up that at the time I wasn't that familiar with was the changeable weather patterns in Yantai. And so they talked about that was a big challenge for them, moving from their hometown. Some people said their hometown in the same province. The vast majority of students are from the same province, Shandong province, but it's a fair sized province. And so they would talk about maybe it was warmer in their hometown, but I think all the students mentioned how changeable the weather is in Yantai. So I wasn't that familiar with it yet because I've only been back in China a couple of months. But sure enough, just recently, a few days ago, I witnessed it. We had some we've had some snow maybe about a week ago, and then since then it just melted overnight, and then it actually warmed up quite a bit. So I started to get used to wearing heavier footwear because of the snow, but it warmed up enough that I actually found the footwear, any kind, even running shoes, was too hot. And so I actually started wearing sandals again. It was that much warmer. But suddenly we had a big snowstorm a couple of days ago, and biggest snowstorm yet. And it was wet snow, but here I am, I think day two now. The snow is still on the ground and all around on the trees. It's not melting. So it stayed cold enough for the snow not to melt. So I think it normally melts. So anyway, that change in temperature going from snow to warm enough where you're wearing sandals to class and then back to snow in just within a week. Yeah, definitely very changeable. It's quite windy here too. So you're right on the ocean. So that's the reason. It's quite windy all the time. So weather systems are constantly changing, and it's very hilly here. So sometimes we get even caught in cloud. So yeah, it's definitely very changeable. So anyway, this heavy snowfall, I really started for the first time to see how the students react to the snowfall. I had a few students actually say they had to skip class because they'd walked in the hail and the hail had hit them and melted on them, and they caught a cold like instantly. And so I communicated that I didn't fully believe that they could catch cold so quickly. And so I guess I was a little riled up about these people. I had a couple students make up excuses that they couldn't come to class because they caught a cold because they'd walked outside in the snow. And I just thought, well, you're talking to a Canadian here. And so when I went to class, I was pretty riled up, and I just started off right away like, listen, you chose the wrong person for your excuses about getting cold. I said, do you realize I have lived in minus 46 degrees Celsius weather? And I said, a little bit of hail is not going to convince me that you need to skip class. So I did a little soliloquy about that. And so anyway, the students, they talk about the snow being cold. They're not used to it. So it's China. It's not Canada. They have, it's quite warm in the south still in China, but we're in the north where you do get snow. But, we're not far enough north that where it's serious snow. So it comes, but it lasts a few days and typically melts. There are ski hills around, so but they must make snow or something. There can't be enough snow to regularly ski here. So anyway, yeah, we're not so far north as to expect snow all the time. So I wouldn't expect people to be fully adjusted to snow. So I do expect a few differences. So you do hear about complaints about how cold it is, and of course, for me, it's not a big deal. It's not what I would call cold, but they're not used to it. That's okay. But it's beautiful. We had quite a dump of snow, and I just posted on WeChat, and I'm connected directly to quite a few students on WeChat for my class. And I just said, oh, this reminds me of Christmas in Canada, except the lights are missing. And so I got a lot of comments on that, a lot of likes and so on. And I discovered through discussions, students are very interested in Christmas. They're just interested in the Western holidays, period. And I think Christmas is, probably because we just had snow, they have quite a bit of interest in it now. And so a lot of them would have kind of fantasies of sort of wanting to visit the West at Christmas time and experience that magic. So I just want to say that there's still a lot of interest in the West amongst the students. They're here to learn English, the ones I'm teaching, and I've got 150 students in 4 classes. And some of whom will share how much English they have on their phone, say English music. I had one student whose English is quite good. She said that the vast majority of the songs on her phone were in English, so very little Chinese. And often this is why their English is that much better, because they're listening to lots of English songs or watching English movies, or they have a fantasy about traveling to the West. This, where I am now at Ludong University, I would say the students are not as wealthy as the ones I used to teach in high school in the capital city of this province, who typically had, I think just about everyone had been overseas. Students here, I don't think I've heard of a single student that's been outside of China, but they have dreams of going outside of China. So they're not thinking about university, but going to university necessarily in the West, but traveling through the West after they graduate. And so there is that dream, and they do love a lot of Western songs, and they want to know sort of Western sayings, Western slang. It's kind of cool to know Western slang. So there's still a lot of interest in English. So as much as we talk about the multipolar world, I would say the young people are showing me that there's still a lot of interest in the West, and they know a lot of stories. So we have a small library, and they can get all sorts of books. And of course, they want to know, a lot of it's mainly girls that are learning English. It's quite dramatic. What would I say? A typical class. My classes are maybe 30 to 40 people, and I would say probably the most, there's maybe 5 guys in a classroom. The rest are girls. So it's definitely a female thing to learn another language, the English language. And so a lot of the girls, they're interested in romance stories if they're reading. And of course, there's a whole range of music groups. even including rap, because I did a little census about, ask people what kind of songs that they like to listen to, just showing them the categories as part of teaching them English. That you just don't say you like Western music, you got to say the category. What is the category of music? And I discovered, people are listening to the whole range of things, including the girls. So there is a great interest in learning English, and I actually have 2 hours a week that are teacher office hours, and people come to that office and just sit with me and chat in English, just about anything, just to improve their English. And so often we're talking about music or just different cultural differences. And so, anyway, so I'm really getting to know the students. I think I get a depth of understanding of the Chinese thinking about the West from my students, probably more than any other place you would ever find it. Um, and so, some of the other things I've learned is outside, they're not used to this kind of weather, this colder weather. And so, you do hear a few complaints about the cold, but but they do have fantasies about Christmas and the beautiful time of Christmas, that spiritual kind of feeling of Christmas. There's a lot of what I've been wanting to talk about is that 10 years ago, I first came to China and I taught at a university in another city, probably a higher level university, but still, none of the students had been to the West. They were still pretty purely Chinese. They hadn't been influenced that much. But of course, they listened to Western songs. And I can't help but compare the time when I was teaching at Nanjing Forestry University. And at the time, before I came to China, what I read was that girls and guys were not interacting that much with each other. Like there wasn't much dating going on. It was quite formal, and people kept, that people kept to themselves, or different genders kept to themselves. And what I discovered coming to China, that there was a lot more interaction between girls and guys, like having guys having girlfriends and whatnot, than what was being written about. But I have to say now, 10 years later, it feels much more. I see much more. I didn't see any smoking 10 years ago in this other university. And I don't think I ever saw any drinking. And here I am in further north at a different university, kind of more rural, less higher status university. But I would say there's much more. I really detect a greater sense of freedom, a desire for freedom. I would say the students seem way more westernized than 10 years ago. So I don't know how, if we can say this is representative of all of China, but I would say it's pretty dramatic difference. These students are definitely very different from the ones I taught 10 years ago. And so I would say there's a lot of interaction between girls and guys. I see people holding hands everywhere, and girlfriends and boyfriends. And so that just doesn't seem to be an issue, and no one's hiding it or anything. There isn't any kind of shyness about it. And as I say, the smoking, I've seen smoking quite a bit. I haven't seen drinking, like of alcohol, in public, but recently in a class I was teaching about food, and part of that was comparing Western and Chinese food. I got into the issue of wine pairing because that's what the chapter addressed as something that's different in the West that they don't have in China. There's no such thing as pairing alcohol to food. They don't have that. And so I was just teaching that, did a little lesson on the difference in cuisine between the two regions of the world. And so I brought some wine to class. And just to show them, we didn't actually drink any, but just to show them wine bottles, white wine, and that goes tends to go with fish, and red wine with stronger flavored foods like cheeses and meats. Again, this was part of their reading, and it was quite interesting in a couple of different classes. One of my classes that isn't as accomplished in English, they were very interested in the bottles of wine, and I actually had three different students ask me to if I would open a bottle and if they could try some, and I just decided no, maybe it's not safe to go there to be serving alcohol in a class at university in China. And so I just said, no, I'm not going to do that. And so, but I did have three students ask, and one student actually showed me her phone and showed me the kind of alcohol that she'd tried in the previous summer. So this just seemed totally different from the kind of students I used to teach 10 years ago in Nanjing. You wouldn't hear anything about alcohol. Like, you really got the sense that no one had alcohol, no one had cigarettes. I never heard of a university party. It's quite quiet. I mean, if you're getting together with friends, you'd go to dinner together. That's basically what you do. You go out to dinner together with your roommates or whatnot, but alcohol is not served. And I'm not even sure about the drinking age here, but typically alcohol um, is associated with older men or older people in their 50s. So definitely not university students. There's this whole orientation that you're young, you need to focus on your studies. Your studies come first before everything else. So I mean, you're not even allowed to get married by a certain age because it would interfere with your schooling, for instance. So, certainly, drinking alcohol would be all part of that, interfering with your ability to do well in school. The whole focus is you're young, you haven't finished your schooling part of your life, and that's what's number one. So don't get into drinking, don't get married. Just focus on your studies. So to be here and see 10 years later, this girl is showing me some of the alcohol that she's tried, one of which was just a red wine, Merlot, she was telling me, and she didn't like the flavor of it. But the other was a much stronger alcohol that I was surprised she had even tried. And so, yeah, so Jägermeister, it was Jägermeister. So that just totally shocked me. And again, it just feels a little wilder, a little more westernized, I would say. That's maybe the easiest way for me to try and compare them to the students I taught 10 years ago. And again, I don't know if this is representative, but definitely I think there's still a heavy influence of the West on China. And the other thing I noticed with the students, again, getting back to the weather, the snowstorm, everyone is carrying an umbrella when it's snowing. And so this is completely alien to me. I've never even heard of this, never seen it anywhere. In Canada, if it's snowing, you just put on a hat, a toque. But no one, I haven't seen anyone wear a toque here, although I have seen them for sale actually on campus in one of the stores. But I haven't seen anyone wearing a toque, and I'm guessing because maybe it could mess up your hair. And umbrella is something more familiar to Chinese. So definitely Chinese girls, umbrella to stay in the shade, to not get a suntan. And of course, when it's raining. So to use it for snow, yeah, and so it's pretty funny walking down the street in winter and you see, students marching along and virtually everyone is carrying an umbrella because it's snowing. And so that is an interesting thing. They're just not used to snow. But I noticed on WeChat, a lot of the students, again, I'm directly connected to a lot of my students, to basically sort of generate a conversation about English. They're posting pictures. And so there a lot of them were creating snowmen. So they really did go out in the snow and they would make little figures like little ducks and line them up against each other or snowmen, every which thing you can think of. And so they certainly really enjoyed playing in the snow. I never saw any snowball fights or any pictures of that, and haven't witnessed that. It's more like just forming little creatures out and creating them out of snow, and then taking pictures. Lots of people taking pictures of the snow itself. So they were definitely enchanted by the snowfall, although find it cold. And they're not, now that it's a weekend, I haven't seen people outside playing in the snow so much. They're just studying inside. But it is late in the semester. It is getting into heavier testing season as we get closer to Christmas. So the pressure on students is building now in the semester. So they're just preparing for the various exams that they have to do. And so, anyway, yeah, so it's getting a real picture of that students have been westernized more than ever, I think. Yeah, I would say that in many ways. So they're quite open. So some of the things too that students talk about or quote are from Western literature. So there's still a lot of interest in the West, and a lot of, I guess, must be access to Western ideas. And so they just kind of feel more free spirited, I think. I read this about China that young people, I have students, but there is a high unemployment rate apparently amongst young people. And I've just heard about that. I haven't really witnessed anything. Um, but yeah, there's a sense of living life, following your heart, following the dream that you have, sort of Western ideas. And so I find that would be my commentary as someone who's been a teacher throughout most of those 10 years in China. Um, I'm dealing with the students, I'm interacting with them in English. We get into deeper topics, much deeper than you ever would in business. I think I have a much bigger connection with the pulse of China than you're probably going to find a person like me, a teacher, anywhere else for sure. Really held, their challenges and so on. Um, so anyway, so it's fascinating to see the differences over time, what's happening in China.
And that brings us to a close of another episode of The Maple Dragon, the 7-year-long chronicles of a Canadian professor in China. Till next time, take care of yourself. Goodbye.